Hello everyone. Good morning to one and all, ma. Our continuation topic, grid security infrastructure. In previous video, we have seen up to this figure like explanation. Now I can continuation the topic grid security infrastructure. Now listen carefully. The figure illustrates you the message level security and transport level security in detail. Now we can look at this in this diagram. X point 509 end entity certificates and username and passwords are used as authentication credentials. These are used for authentication credentials, and X point 509 proxy certificates, it is used for delegation. So authorization allows for a variety of authorization schemes, and including here a grid map file and one more a security assertion markup language a protocol. So the web services are portions of grid security infrastructure. Here we are using a simple object access protocol as their message protocol for communication. So what our main aim of message protection in the sense, it can be provided either by transport level security, and which transports simple object access protocol messages through over the transport level security, or by message level security, which is signing and encrypting a portion of the simple object access protocol message by using the web service security standard. This is the concept of message protection by using transport level security as well as message level security. In generally, we can discuss grid security infrastructure supports four security mechanisms. Here look at this four security mechanisms. First one, we can learn about authentication and authorization mechanisms. It supports to verify the user identity. User identity, it's must and should correct or not, if you have to verify that. And then we have to define some access rights on that particular resources of a grid system. And then encryption. Encryption is nothing but by which messages can be protected to provide a confidentiality. What I meant to say, encryption, and by which messages can be protected to provide a confidentiality. Later, coming to the integrity protection, it means by which a receiver can verify that messages were not altered, okay, were not changed in transit from the sender. This is the concept of integrity. And coming to the replay prevention, what the fourth security mechanism, replay prevention, is said to be by which a receiver can verify that it has not received the same message previously. This is the concept of replay prevention. Now we can study about in detail what is a transport level security. It entails a simple object access protocol messages, so conveyed over a network connection protected by a transport level security. So a transport level security provides for both integrity protection and as well as a privacy via encryption. So the transport level security is normally used in a conjunction with X point 509 credentials for authentication purpose, but it can also be used without such credentials to provide a message protection without authentication, and we are oftenly referred to as anonymous transport level security. So in this mode of operation, and authentication may be done by username and as well as a password in a simple object access protocol messages. Now coming to the message level security in detail. Coming to this concept, grid security infrastructure, it provides a message level security for message protection for simple object access protocol messages by implementing the web service security standard and one more web service secure conversation specification. So The web service security standard, it defines a framework or template for applying a security to individual a simple object access protocol messages. So now the web service secure conversation specification, what it allows in the sense, it allows an initial exchange of messages. What ma? It allows an initial exchange of messages to establish a particular security context which can be used to protect some subsequent messages in a particular manner, so that it requires a less computational overhead. And one more key point of message level security, a grid security infrastructure uses both X.509 public key credentials and as well as the combination of username and password for the purpose of authentication. Now what I meant to say in the sense, grid security infrastructure allows a 3 additional protection mechanisms. How many additional mechanisms it allows? Three additional potential protection, three additional protection mechanisms. First one is integrity protection. What I meant to say in the sense, by which a receiver can verify that messages were not altered in transit from the sender. Okay. Now coming to the second one is encryption, by which messages can be protected to provide a confidentiality. It is nothing but encryption. And coming to the third one is replay prevention, in the sense by which a receiver can verify that it has not received the same message previously. So these protections are provided between a web service security and web service secure conversation. The former application keys associated with the sender and as well as the receiver's X.509 credentials. The X.509 credentials are used to establish a session key. What the establish session key, that is used to provide the message protection. This is the concept of that one. Now we can study about what is authentication and a delegation. Now we can learn about this authentication and delegation in clearly. What does it exactly? We can now discuss. Authentication and delegation through the use of X.509 certificates and as well as public keys as a new feature in Globus Toolkit 4 and as well as grid security infrastructure. It also supports authentication through a plain usernames and as well as passwords as a deployment option. So grid security infrastructure uses X.509 certificates to identify a persistent users and as well as services. So as a central concept in grid security infrastructure authentication, a certificate includes a primary four primary pieces of information. How many? Four primary pieces of information a certificate includes. Now first one is a subject name. Listen carefully. A subject name which identifies the person or object that the certificate represents or not. And then the public key belonging to the particular subject. And coming to the third one, the identity of a certificate authority that has signed the certificate to certify that the public key and the identity of both it belongs to the subject. And coming to the fourth one, that is nothing but a digital signature. What is it? Digital signature. What the name it says? The digital signature of the named certificate authority. So X.509 a credential provides each entity with a unique identifier. So that is nothing but each entity with a unique identifier, that is in the sense that means a distinguished name and as well as a method to assert that identifier to another party through the use of an asymmetric key pair. Through the use of an asymmetric key pair bound to the identifier by that particular certificate. So what you have to explain coming to the grid security infrastructure in the sense, What exactly I meant to say in the sense, X.509 certificate used by a grid security infrastructure or conformant to a relevant standards and conventions. So, grid deployments around the world have established their own certificate authorities based on their third party software to issue that X.509 certificate for use with grid security infrastructure and a Globus toolkit. So, grid security infrastructure also supports the delegation and single sign-on through the use of a standard X.509 proxy certificates. So, what does the proxy certificates allow? It bearers of X.509 to delegate their privileges temporarily to another entity. So, for the purposes of authentication and authorization, and grid security infrastructure treats certificates and proxy certificates equivalently. So, authentication with X.509 credentials can be accomplished either via transport level security, and in the case of a transport level security, or via signature as a particular specified by web service security in the case of a message level security. What exactly I meant to say in the sense, here, so the mutual authentication between two parties is a process by which two parties with certificates signed by the certificate authority, it prove to each other so that they are who they say they are based on the particular certificate and the trust of the certificate authorities that signed each other's certificates. So, grid security infrastructure uses the secure sockets layer, SSL, for its mutual authentication protocol. Okay, it is described as a mutual authentication scheme in the sense, for example, one person named Alice and the second person named Bob. For example, if we have to mutually authenticate that to the first person Alice, establishes a connection to the second person Bob. To start the authentication process, Alice gives Bob her certificate. The certificate tells Bob who Alice is claiming to be the identity, and what Alice public key is, and what certificate authority is being used to certify the certificate. So, Bob will first make sure that the certificate is valid by checking the certificate authority's digital signature. So, we to make sure that the certificate authority actually signed the certificate, and as well as the certificate has not been tampered with. Once Bob has checked out Alice's certificate, Bob must make sure Alice really is the person identified in the certificate. Whether it want to check the correct person is authorized person or authenticated person or not by using some certificate authority using a digital signature. Okay, this is the concept of mutually authenticate the first person to the second person, how it establishes a connection, and how it replies Alice to Bob and Bob to Alice by using some certificate authority. Encrypt with private key, we were checking some valid or not, and challenge a message to encrypt, and encrypted challenge a message to the Bob, and then they are decrypt with public key and send to the Bob, it checking a public key certificate authority it's valid or not, and finally this send challenge message to encrypt, and then encrypt with the private key, and then they decrypt with the public key and send to this encrypted challenge message to the finally a Bob. This is the explanation. Okay, now I can say here what exactly the grid security infrastructure also supports the delegation and single sign-on through the use of a standard X.509 proxy certificates. For the purposes of authentication and authorization, and as well as grid security infrastructure treats certificates and as well as proxy certificates equivalently. And coming to the authentication with X.509 credentials, it can be it can be accomplished either via transport level security, in the case of transport level security, or via signature as specified by a web service security, in the case of a message level security. So finally, what I am saying in the sense, the mutual authentication scheme, here we have to generate the Alice and Bob. The Bob generates a random message and sends it to the Alice, asking Alice to encrypt it. Alice encrypts the message by using her private key and sends it back to the Bob. Bob decrypts the particular message by using Alice's public key if this results in the original random message. So the Bob knows Alice is who she says she is. Now the Bob trusts Alice's identity. The same operation must happen in reverse. Now, Bob sends Alice his certificate and Alice validates the certificate and sends a challenge message to be encrypted. The Bob encrypts the particular message and sends it back to Alice. So, Alice decrypts it and compares it with the original message. If it matches or not the test, Alice knows Bob is who he says he is. That is the concept of mutual authentication scheme. Now we can discuss the concept of trust delegation. What is the trust delegation? Now we can explain the trust delegation by using this diagram, and then if you have to understand the concept is clearly. What I am saying is here, listen carefully. The figure illustrates you a sequence of trust delegations by using a new certificates or signed by owners rather by a certificate authority. Okay, the figure represents you sequence of trust delegations. New certificates are signed by owners rather by a certificate authority. Here look at this trust delegation concept clearly, and then if we have to understand, here we want to reduce or even avoid the number of times the user must enter his passphrase when several grids are used or have agents is nothing but local or remote requesting services on behalf of a user, and grid security infrastructure provides a delegation capability and a delegation service that provides an interface to allow clients to delegate and renew X.509 proxy certificates to a service. So the interface to this service, it is based on web service trust specification. Here a proxy consists of a new certificate and as well as a private key. Look at this. Okay, the key pair that is used for the proxy, that is a public key embedded in that a particular certificate and as well as a private key, may either be regenerated for each proxy or to be obtained or attained by other means. Okay, so the new certificate, what it contains, the owner's identity and modified slightly to indicate that it is a proxy. Okay, so the new certificate is signed by the owner rather than a certificate authority, as shown in the below figure you. Okay, the figure explains you the certificate also includes a time notation after which proxy, okay, after, see, look at this, after which proxy should no longer be accepted by others. Here look at this diagram. The figure illustrates you here sequence of trust delegations and new certificates are assigned by owners rather by a certificate authority. Here look at this diagram. Certificate authority and signature. The signature will be signed to that particular user and the signature will be signed to the proxy, and then the signature will sign with the proxy n, proxy 1 up to proxy n. It will the certificate also includes a particular time notation after which proxy should no longer be accepted by others. What I am saying, this explanation in the sense, these proxies, Look at this diagram. These proxies have limited lifetimes because the proxy is not valid for very long. So it does not have to stay quite as secure as owner's private key, and thus it is possible to store a proxy's private key in a local storage system without being encrypted, and as long as permissions on a file, you want to prevent anyone else from looking at them easily. So first of all, what I want to say, the key points, listen carefully. Once a proxy is created and stored, user can use proxy certificate and private key for mutual authentication without entering a password. And then when proxies are used and mutual authentication process differs slightly, so a remote party receives not only the proxy certificates, it is signed by the owner, but also the owner's certificate. And coming to the next point, during mutual authentication and the owner's public key obtained from her certificate, it is used to validate the signature on that a particular proxy certificate. So a certificate authorities public keys is then used to validate the signature on the owner's certificate. This establishes a chain of trust from certificate authority to a lost proxy through a successive owners of resources. Now, the grid security infrastructure uses a web service security with textual usernames and as well as passwords. So this mechanism supports more rudimentary web service applications. Okay, what our main conclusion in the sense, when we are using usernames and passwords as opposed to X.509 credentials, so the grid security infrastructure provides authentication but no advanced security features such as delegation and confidentiality and integrity and replay prevention. So however, one can use usernames and passwords with anonymous transport level security, such as unauthenticated transport level security, to make sure that privacy issues in that particular cloud, in that particular grid security. Okay, this is the concept what I want to say. One can use usernames and passwords with anonymous transport level security, such as unauthenticated transport level security, to make sure that privacy issues in that particular grid security infrastructure. This is the overall concept of grid security infrastructure. Later we discuss in further video the next topic, the fourth concept, that is nothing but cloud infrastructure security. At a cloud side, how the security will provide by using these platforms is there nama. Infrastructure as a services is there na. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. These services, how we can at cloud infrastructure, how we want to provide a secured one or not. Okay, in further video we can discuss cloud infrastructure security. Thank you ma, one and all.